call to order the Lake Mills Plan Commission meeting of July 26, 2022. We'll proceed with roll call.
Mr. Holman,
Here.
Ms. Lazars,
Here.
Mr. Mason,
Here.
Mr. Foster,
Here.
Mr. Coots,
Here.
Mrs. Bishop.
Here.
Aye. Item number 3 is correction and/or approval of the meeting minutes of June 28, 2022.
Like to make a motion to accept as printed.
Second.
Mr. Holman moved and Mr. Foster seconded to accept the minutes as presented. Any discussion? All right, and in that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Ms. Lazars,
Aye.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
Ms. Foster, Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
They didn't ask me, sorry. Mr. Holman didn't get asked.
I'm sorry, Mr. Holman.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye, thank you. Item number 4, questions and public comment. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. If your comments pertain to a public hearing, please hold your comments until the hearing. We do have 2 public hearings this evening. Item number 5, rezoning request by Richard Wollin to rezone property at 454 Tyranena Park Road from PI Planned Industrial to R14 Single Family Residential. Item number 7, rezoning request by Steve Bieda of Mao and Associates to rezone property owned by Robert Mangen north of Tyranena Park Road, situated south of the Rock Creek Apartment Development Parcel 246-0714-0734-025 from R14 Single Family Residential to R312 Multifamily. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep comments limited to 3 minutes. State name and address when starting comments. Also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. For people online, please follow the Zoom link or the phone number listed on the Plan Commission agenda. If anyone here wants to comment on any aspect of the comprehensive plan work currently underway, this would also be a time to comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on the comprehensive planning process? Okay. All right. Seeing none, then we won't afford that opportunity for this meeting. All right. Are there any public comments at this time? Anyone commenting online? All right, in that case, we proceed with item number 5, public hearing, request for a zoning amendment from Richard Wollin for the purpose of changing zoning of parcel 2460713124150 owned by 454 Tyranena Park LLC from planned industrial PI to single family R14. Before we take public testimony regarding this request, then I'd like to call on our consulting planners to present the request and our recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Lazarus. I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. I am not able to present. The materials that I'll be talking from are on the Plan Commission webpage that anyone can link to, but unfortunately I just can't put something up on the screen at this time.
I think you have to get closer to us, and we can't hear you.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. So again, apologies, I won't be able to present at this time. We're trying to sort through it. The property in question on Tyranena Park Road has been zoned for I-2 or Warehouse Manufacturing District for a number of years. We've put in the memo, as you can see there, from 2003. It was one of the earlier zoning maps that we have from there showing that it was zoned as such. The request, obviously, is to rezone it to single-family residential. The property owner is a number of things, looking to sell it and/or looking to build an accessory building on it. Their statements to the city and their reason for application is that they're not able to do what they want with it because with it being a single-family home, in Zone I-2, it is considered legal non-conforming, continue to function as a single-family home, and the use can be a single-family home, but you're then limited by the amount of improvements that you can make to it. And again, he's trying to sell it as a single-family home. That becomes a challenge for whomever is going to buy it because it is legal non-conforming. The area around it, when you look at the zoning map, it is surrounded by industrial properties to the east, west, and to the south. Not all of the properties are in the city, but they are used for industrial or manufacturing or light manufacturing, light industrial uses. From the city's perspective, it has been planned to be industrial uses for the long term for a number of years in keeping with the surrounding development. The fact that it has continued to be used as single family for this many years is not uncommon when lands developed, when they were in the town and other development in the town kind of popped up around it and then has since annexed. We outline in our findings that one of them is the proposed official zoning map amendment furthers the purposes of the zoning code as outlined in specific sections of the code. The map amendment is intended to make a non-conforming use conforming, but this is an area where the city has planned for residential development to go away over time because of the size and scale of the manufacturing uses that immediately surround it. That this property or rezoning it to R14 in staff's opinion is contrary to the purposes of the zoning code for this area. It is intended to be, in our opinion, an industrial area located near the intersection of two county highways. Would the zoning map amendment maintain the desired consistency of land uses, land use intensities, and impacts related to the surrounding environments of the property? Well, single family certainly is the least intensive use out there. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's surrounded by manufacturing or light industrial uses, but that is the intention for that area. So while the rezoning would not necessarily be more intensive or result in impacts to the other properties, it's the reverse that is true. It is the presence of all of the surrounding industrial development next to a single-family home that is kind of intended to go away over time, limited amount of improvements to be. You can maintain the building, but you can't expand it. It is one of those properties that would be intended to convert to industrial over time. Would the trend of development in the general area of the property in question, including changes which have taken place since the day the property in question was placed in its present zoning classification? Well, it's been a single-family development from the town from years ago, but the trend since that was built has been the conversion of properties or the outright zoning of properties, whether they were in the town and then annexed into the city, as industrial development or light manufacturing development. So again, it's staff's opinion that the proposed rezoning is contrary to the long-range plans, which is the next statement. Would the zoning map designation be brought into conformity with the comprehensive plan? No, it would not be. The comprehensive plan has spelled out or called for this area to be general industrial uses. And then there are a number of goals, objectives, and policies that are associated with the light manufacturing or general industrial character of the area. Some of the objectives are to provide distance between incompatible uses. Well, again, this is non-conforming. It's intended to go away over time. That the city will direct intensive commercial industrial uses to locations near existing planned arterial roads, specifically listing Tyranena Road and CP Avenue and County A. We certainly do try to have a mix of residential types throughout the community, but not intermixed into, I will say, more intensive development types like the manufacturing. The recommendation that we have is that we're recommending the Plan Commission deny this rezoning application, and we've listed a number of reasons in there aligning with the findings that it doesn't meet the findings in staff's opinion for the rezoning for the number of reasons that I just cited. I don't know if a petitioner is here to speak on behalf of this. No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. Is there anyone who wishes, we are in public hearing on this matter, is there anyone who wishes to comment on the proposed rezoning? Would anyone like to comment on the proposed rezoning for this parcel at 454 Tyranena Park Road? Is there anyone who wishes to comment on this proposed rezoning? All right, hearing none, the public hearing is closed. And we go on to item number 6, discussion and recommendation on request for a zoning amendment from Richard Wollin for the purpose of changing the zoning of parcel 2460713124150 owned by 454 Tyranena Park LLC from planned industrial PI to single family R14. Plan commissioners, you do have a plan commission motion before you written in the affirmative, which is typical. The motion 2271 is recommendation to City Council for zoning amendment 454 Tyranena Park Road, parcel 2460713124150 by 454 Tyranena Park LLC, owner and petitioner Richard Wollin. This motion sets forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes, sets forth the request to rezone 454 Tyranena Park Road from PI planned industrial to R14 single-family residential. The review by the city staff and consultants, tonight's public hearing and Plan Commission review. This motion does provide for a Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to approve the requested rezoning following procedures set forth in Chapter 660 zoning regulations. So we do have this before us. The recommendation is to deny the petition for the reasons that Mr. Wolf has enunciated, and you can see the recommendation here. So we would be looking at passing the motion as written or passing a different motion than this. If the Plan Commission wishes to pass a motion denying this request, then you would be also attaching the reasons that are listed in the recommendation. So you have a motion for the rezoning, and anyone can make a motion concerning the prepared motion, or you may make a motion concerning a different motion.
To proceed with the discussion, do we need to do something on the motion front?
Actually, you're right about that. Yes, we need to. Yeah, that's right. You need to make. So if you wanted to deny it, you would just say, for the prepared motion, you would just. Most of you would have to say no. So yes, you're correct. That's a good point.
So we could make a motion to accept the motion as printed, and then
Yeah.
if people decided to deny it, they could at the vote?
They could, yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept as printed.
It's been moved to accept the prepared motion 2271. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept motion 2271, which approves the requested rezoning. Is there any further discussion? Motion by Mr. Holman and second by Dr. Mason, So,
I have a question.
any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. This is probably more for Steve. I seem to remember before they fixed Highway A, there was some discussion about routing that bridge down this way. Do you think that'll ever come back up again if we change this? They were trying to get the truck traffic off of Mulberry.
Right, the transportation plan clearly reroutes A and G up this route and looks at trying to get as much truck traffic off 89 as possible, Main Street. So as part of that proposal, one of the things we looked at was instead of trying to do that zigzag through there,
Yeah.
because we also have that route running through the Olson property to the north, that it would be better to realign that. We did talk to Wistat, and they don't have any projects coming up for quite a while,
Yeah.
like 40 years. So it wasn't something that we were going to talk about now, but it is in the transportation plan. It is something that would be a smart idea at some point in the future.
Yeah.
It also improves the overall grades on that intersection. So that the intersection at Tyranena Brewery there, where
Right.
Owen Street currently hits, would be a better intersection than Mulberry Street,
Right, for truck traffic and stuff, yeah.
but it's way down the road.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Is there further discussion or questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Is it my understanding that that this house was part of the old Brickell property?
This house was annexed and purchased by the Brickell property prior to 2000, but yes, it was all part of it. In fact, the Wollins controlled the Geiger property for quite a while, and both Geiger and the Wollins have rented this house out as long as they've had it, but it was intended to be part of the overall industrial site of Geiger Brickell.
I guess my opinion, until the value of the land exceeds the desire to keep it as a single family, it just seems a little counterintuitive to have that much property and not be able to build a garage on it. And if one of the industries chooses to grow, generally speaking, the price of a house doesn't mean anything, because the projected proposal of new industrial development is so great that a house in the way usually never is a factor. So I guess I'm just wondering how currently we could, not make the property as positive or as valuable as we can without spot zoning.
So there are limitations on building an accessory building out there, and I think that's one of the issues, is that it may be more limiting than he would like it to be. But again, the home has a garage, and then yes, you can build a smaller accessory building on the site. You just can't build one as large as he wants to build.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we're zoned a single family, he can't build it as large as he wants to build it.
Can't build a 1,500 square foot building, build 1,000 or 1,200?
1,200.
And to follow up on that, if the petitioner did want to build the building of the size he's proposing, it would then have to meet the industrial requirements because that's the current zoning.
That is correct. So setbacks, building materials, you do have to get an approval through the city, which is not uncommon, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Plan commissioners, did anyone have any other questions or comments? We do have a motion.
I just have
Yeah.
one more question. Is there any other way to let them in that zoning district build as a conditional use per se, or some other vehicle without spot zoning? Because I totally get the concept of, not spot zoning. However, a new property owner would realize that he's in the middle of an industrial area, and that would predictate potentially the value of the house. So there's a lot of things that are known instead of unknown here. It's not like there's no house there and he's trying to rezone it residential. The house is already there.
A hypothetical is someone could come in and buy the home and decide to use it for industrial purposes. I mean, there are building codes that they'd have to meet, and they could do additions to the building. It becomes a little more challenging when you're trying to put an accessory building in the back. So there are things that can be done, and again, had this been part of the original plan for the development of the East, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It never came to fruition that way, and now we're trying to figure out a way to enable maybe more use on the property than it's intended to have. But there are things that's just not as robust as maybe the property owner wants to do with it. And if he's trying to sell it as single family, well, that becomes a challenge for him. Who's going to buy it? Because who's going to buy? It really becomes the lenders on loaning money for a home that is a legal non-conforming use. It's not that it just doesn't meet a setback requirement or something. It's if it was, it's the use issue. And so, but I think for some user who may want to convert the home and maybe expand a little bit for some industrial, I'll say an industrial incubator, smaller industrial or light manufacturing space, I think it could be a good site for that. It's using it as a single family when, as you can see, you are wholly surrounded by manufacturing users.
Well, I think we see that the property continues to have options that, you can have a smaller industrial use, or you can continue as a legal non-conforming use, which we have seen time and time again, and also lasting for a very long time without exceeding the footprint that would cause issues for its status. So it does have options as legal non-conforming, or like Mr. Wolf has mentioned, you do from time to time see a smaller industrial use. So, or a third, that it may be bought by someone else and absorbed into a larger property, all as an industrial use.
I'm just disturbed with legal non-conforming. It's always a thumb on the property. We need to develop more areas. Obviously, we do initially, but we got to have more things approved than legal non-conforming. You have issues of rebuild and whatnot, and then right away it's in question with a thumb on the property owner, and I'm just not for that. So I wish there was another way other than spot zoning to accomplish, them to do something with that much acreage.
Well, it looks like we have laid out the options so far, and Plan Commissioners, do you have any other comments or questions on this matter? All right. Well, Well, it's been moved and seconded to, on motion to pass, as it were, motion 2271. Any further comments or questions? All right, in that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Mason,
Nay.
Mr. Coots,
Nay.
Mrs. Bishop,
No.
Mr. Holman,
Aye.
Ms. Lazarus,
No?
and Mr. Foster.
Aye.
All right, so as I understand it, it's 4 no and 2 yes on this, and so the motion is denied. And for the record, in that case, then we would be listing the reasons in the Plan Commissioner's memo, and the consultant's memo. We would be listing those reasons along with our recommendation to the City Council. All right. We go on with item number 7, public hearing request for zoning amendment from Steve Bieda of Mao and Associates for the purpose of changing the zoning of parcel 24607140734 owned by Robert Mangen from single-family residential R14 to multifamily R312. Before we take public testimony on this matter, then I would call on our planning consultants to give an overview of this request.
Thank you. With the ability to present a little bit here, so everybody can see, on the screen is the aerial and highlighting the property in question, which is outlined in red dash. As you can see to the north is the existing multifamily development that Mr. Mangen has. To the east is the county grounds where it has a gun range, and there's some rural residential development in the town, single family. To the south is some town development, single family, and then to the west is one property in the town, but then along the roadway are single family homes that are within the city. I do want to go back a little bit. If you recall the original approval for Mr. Mangen's development, multifamily development, we tried to just have a brief overview in there. Mr. Mangen actually owned property a little further to the west that he was trying to develop, but that area and a portion of the property that's multifamily here had environmental constraints, which is why the planned development district was used up there to give some flexibility. I am going to shift just to a different area, so it just shows this larger area. So you can see that the interstate abuts the multifamily in the north, and then again you have the gun range by the county on the east. But there's a stream that runs through there, so that posed challenges. There were initially intended to be some two-family development in there, and that couldn't come to fruition because of the environmental constraints. But the multifamily that you're seeing there was approved over 2014, 2015, 2016, and developed over time, and it's fully built out. The parcel in question, obviously, is this larger parcel to the south. As a part of that approval, there was required to be a secondary connection out to Tyranena, and that's what you see there as an access road for life safety needs. It's also utility going through there. As a part of that plan development approval, the parcel that's being requested to be rezoned to multifamily now was always zoned single-family. And the rationale behind that was, as you start heading south, you start getting into existing single-family. It was intended that the area would transition back to single-family, and it has been held for single-family all this time by Mr. Mangen. Mr. Mangen, my understanding, doesn't develop single-family projects. He focuses on multifamily, and he did not want to sell off this parcel. This was, at that time, he was telling us, until he completed his multifamily, he didn't want more single-family next to him in case people complained about the multifamily to the north. That was kind of the history back then. The staff, a development proposal, I'll say, a layout was provided to provide a picture to plan commissioners. I want to make it very clear at this time, there is no approval pending for anything that was submitted with this request. It is just to rezone it to a multifamily district. I want to make sure that that's very understood. He was just trying to provide a concept of a potential layout to, I guess, paint a better picture. Again, looking through the findings, the zoning map amendment, does this proposed amendment further the purposes of the zoning code? Staff's opinion is that the R312 designation is inconsistent with what was intended for that area and the way it's been zoned, transitioning back to the single family to the south. Does the proposed amendment maintain the desired consistency of land uses, intensities, et cetera? In staff's opinion, no, it does not maintain the desired consistency of land uses there. It's desired to be single family, had been planned with the original plan development approval to be single family. And from the staff's perspective and plan commission and obviously council decisions, that was what was intended for that area. The trend for development in the area, the trend for development has now been kind of infilling of single family along Tyranena and the adjacent roadway. Some new homes have been constructed in the last few years. When we had to correct the map from the R2 to the R3 because of some of the environmental features, there was one new home over there. They came out, they expressed concern about more multifamily in the area. That was a few years back. Must have been 2017 or 2018, and that would certainly be on the record. And again, at that time, it was explained that this was just the one development was being completed, and then the remainder of the vacant lands would be for single family. So again, the trend, while you can say that it's been developing as multifamily, it's because of some of the presence of some of the uses around them. Gun range and the interstate really kind of made this a good buffer for to have multifamily there, buffering back to single family. And then would this designation, this change, be brought into conformity with the comprehensive plan? Plan shows this area for this proposed lot for single family. Now that certainly could change based on your decision making, but the goal here was in the long range plan for more single family, minimizing land use conflicts, staff's opinion by putting more multifamily immediately adjacent to those long existing single family would be contrary to minimizing those conflicts, that it isn't a desirable mix of land uses to go to add more multifamily in that area. There certainly are other areas in the community that are planned for multifamily that are available. This doesn't have to be the site in staff's opinion. The long-range plan the comprehensive plan does make accommodation for other areas to be multifamily. So staff's opinion that the proposed amendment does not meet the findings to rezone to our R312 district. I know that the petitioner is here to answer questions, and I'm sure the public wants to comment as well. But I'll answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. We are in public hearing. If anyone wishes to make comment on this proposed rezoning, then please approach the podium and provide your name and address, write it down, and also announce it for the record. Would anyone like to speak? Yes.
Okay, hi. I'm Kim G. I'm here with my husband Corey. We're 20-year homeowners at plot, do you want me to say it? 002-0714-0734-004, which is the piece that's really jutting into this land that we're talking about, okay? We do agree that the city is in need of entry-level type housing, multifamily housing. I have a young adult daughter who lives in town here, and she has difficulty finding affordable housing or rentals in Lake Mills. We understand this problem. We do understand this issue. Quite frankly, this just came up, but to hear that Mr. Merger, who originally had this land, does not build single-family homes and never planned to build single-family homes is troubling, if I'm getting it correct, since this is the plan that was presented to us back when this development first started. When we were originally told the land around us was going to be a mixed-use neighborhood with apartments near the highway and single-family homes on the remaining land heading toward our home, we had time to talk about it, decide how this was going to affect our home and our lives, and we came to the conclusion that we agreed with this plan. Therefore, we didn't sell our home or think about selling our home. I actually thought about remodeling our home, or maybe talking about that. But that was the plan that we believed was going to happen. This plan now, it looks like it's 140 more apartment units. Correct me if I'm mistaken about some of this, but including a building that would be directly across from us and a building to the north of us. This footprint of these apartment buildings are quite imposing, as you can imagine, for our house in that corner. And we have concerns about, some of the things that any homeowner would be concerned about, which is increased traffic, lighting, that would be lighting this area, activity, noise to our current living condition. I do have questions about the ordinance, what is the current city planning ordinance for land use intensity, and for this plot specifically, but I'm hearing that we're changing this in different places in the city to allow for multifamily homes. But I'm just wondering what the ordinance is now. Do we have to change it to make this completely now multifamily use? What are our parameters? What are we thinking is the maximum population we would want in an area? Let me see, what else say? It sounds like also that this plan that we were given for the apartment buildings now is not the actual plan. It's a representation of what could happen, if I understand it.
I'm sorry, I take direction from the chair, so I don't want to answer anything or comment while public comment's going on.
Is this a real plan that?
Oh, well, I remember when Robert Mangen first came with proposals for the whole area, and yes, the initial proposals did show a graduated increase in density from single family all the way to, the apartments that you see today. Yes, that was the original plan.
Okay.
I think, Pam, that the question is the site plan that's currently being proposed is just a concept. And
Right.
Right,
that
it's a concept
it
that
would,
he's
if they actually
showing.
rezoned it to R312, that we would probably see a different, it wouldn't necessarily end up looking like that. It could, but it wouldn't.
Okay.
It's got to go through a lot of review before it would hit that, so it wouldn't go that. What Pam is mentioning is that when we did the original, like Dustin had already mentioned, the whole area there, as we've already told you, is single family. We rezoned that R14 in 2015.
Yep.
And it's actually shown with lots platted in the streets in there, so that was the course that the city has put in their plans since that time. So they're coming in and asking us to change the zoning again. And so that's what they're being reviewed, and the planner has recommended not approving the change.
Okay, okay.
So Kim,
Yeah.
Dan Drescher, attorney for the city.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that this is clear. Currently, the property is zoned R14, which is single-family residential. What Mr. Mangen, the petitioner, has requested is that it be changed to R312, which would allow for multifamily residential development. And then it may go past concept to plan and build.
Okay.
Gotcha?
Yeah, okay, that's perfect. I
Thanks, Kim.
understand. Thank you very much for the clarification. Obviously, we have concerns about it. When we got the survey recently from the city and we looked through that, there was a lot, it discussed a lot of interspersing of multifamily homes with single-family homes, which we like that concept. And I'm all for it, but this doesn't look like that to me. This looks like a lot of multifamily in one area. And I've got concerns about the building, but if we're not even to that process yet, maybe I won't even discuss it. But I'm concerned about what that development would do for water runoff and, lighting and things like that. But if everybody here is in agreement that we're not to that portion yet to worry about that, then I won't bother anybody with that. Yes?
Yeah, we're not to that point.
Okay, we're only talking about the rezoning and if, okay, well, okay, so we are firmly against the, do you have anything to, okay. All right, well, we really want to thank you for your time and listening to our concerns and answering our questions, appreciated. Thank you.
Aye, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. G. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this request? And please, again, write down your name and address for the record and also state your name and address.
My name is Eugene Burrell. I live at W7162 County V. Also, my neighbor Jay Ludeman, he wrote a letter for me. I'm going to read to you, and then I'll give you my comments and so forth. I'm writing in oppose of the request to rezoning partial 2460714 0734025. I am unable to attend the hearing. Excuse me, I gotta put my readers on. There we go. Attending hearing, but would like my opposing heard. I own 2 parcels of property adjoining the parcel in question. The original zoning of Mr. Mangen property was done in part in concern of buffer area between the existing R1 homes and the neighborhood and the very large apartment complex Mangen has built. Mr. Mangen agreed to the original zoning of his variance property. I had become apparent that Mr. Mangen had no intention of honoring but agreement with people living in the area or the city of Lake Mills. This is made evidenced by several variances to the rezoning he verified property of the area. Furthermore, he has made no attempt to develop these properties from R1 usage. Please reject the proposed of rezoning and request to Mangen to honor his agreement. Thank you, Jay Ludeman. Basically, my feelings are pretty much the same as what there was. The original agreement was to keep it all R1. single-family residents in that area. By going R3, he's going against his word and kind of not telling us the truth is what we could expect and everything. Because we were all looking at, this would be single families behind me and also behind Jay. So we think that we should leave the proposal as it is to keep it R1, single-family residence in the area. Okay, thank you.
Gene, can I get that to put it on the record, the letter?
If you want to.
Yeah, it would be good to get that put on the record. The clerk would like it, so.
Sure. Yep, should be on here. You need his address?
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Gene, you could be seated, he'll find you. Is there anybody else?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burrow. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this request?
Hello, my name's Evan Marquardt. Excuse me. I live at the furthest location, West 7148 County Road V. I am probably the youngest homeowner out of the collection here. And I personally, and I'm sure everyone else would agree with me, that I don't want apartments looking into my backyard or Gene's backyard or into Ken's home or anything like that. I'm kind of against it. I am not a fan of it because with the ordinance that Astelin has, the tallest fence that I'm able to build is 12 feet, and that still allows a two-story apartment to see over that fence into my land or into my home or anything like that. With where my location is, I don't have any backing. I don't have any wind blocks or anything like that. I don't have any trees or anything. So if this were to pass through, I don't have time to apply or build anything or erect anything to protect my land or my privacy from any two-story apartments that are in this location. That's my opinion. I thank you for your time, but like I said, I'm not a fan of it, but I allow you guys to proceed and make your decision on your own. Thank you for hearing my opinion.
Okay, good. I see you're writing your name and address. I was about to say something about that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. The public hearing is still open. Would anyone else like to comment on this rezoning request?
Good evening, Steve Bieda with Mountain Associates, representing Bob Mangen. I'm the one who applied for the zoning for Bob. We do the land surveying and civil engineering, of course. We did the previous project with him. Just a few things. Bob asked us to come down and with Scott Hauer, one of his associates. He asked us to look at rezoning this property. Obviously, the previous project he did was very successful for him. He built it over about 7 years. There's 144 units in there. This site does have some challenges, and that's why he asked us to come back and look at it. We do have the traffic noise. We do have the shooting range. And we do have a site that has limited access through it. Yes, we presented a single-family home plan to go in there. I believe he did try to market that and sell that without any success. I don't know if there's still people looking for that kind of a thing right now in this area, but he did try it and it didn't work for him. So he's trying to do something with it. Bob's at the point in his life where he's trying to part with his property and move on with things. He does own the property to I believe it's Rock Creek, on the west side of Rock Creek as well, which he hasn't been able to do anything with as well. But just a few things more about the site. We did look at it to try and come up with a plan, and the plan that I did lay out there, that is a building that we did do up in Green Bay. And yes, it's a pretty accurate plan. I know one of the ladies asked it's a fairly accurate plan as to what could be done. I laid it out many different ways, and it works out pretty well the way I have it set up like that, so it probably would look very similar to that if we did this. I don't know that it matters, but the city is all the way around this. So we have township on 3 sides, and then, of course, our other apartment site is on the north side of us. I wasn't sure how that worked, but so as we kind of looked through this, I had done some other sketches with kind of a hybrid of bringing maybe a cul-de-sac in there and trying to do just a few buildings to the north of that. I don't know if that's something that you would look at considering, but I did several variations, and Bob said, hey, just bring it in, let's just ask for it, see what happens. So I don't know, when you get into the discussion part of it, if that's an option to possibly look at doing some multifamily, again, to screen some more of the highway noise, number one, and secondly, to look at screening some of the noise that would come from the shooting range to the east of us over there. We definitely could, or I could have Bob look at one of my sketches and potentially come back with that. But if there was a way to do a hybrid of some of the multifamily and some of the single family to buffer all the neighbors that are here, I mean, we certainly would consider that. Obviously, multifamily is what Bob does, so that's what he wanted us to look into. However, there is option to do some of that. It's just he would have to, again, just part out the pieces that he couldn't do. Let me see. When it comes to that project, again, like I said, it's been very successful, and that's why he wanted us to pursue it. People want to be in Lake Mills. As fast as he could build those buildings, they were full before they were even built. So obviously, there's a need in this area for more of that type of housing. Yes, it becomes a larger site. I recognize that. However, it's easier for these management companies to manage these larger sites than it is to manage the small ones. We can have on-site management. We can have clubhouses and things of that nature, amenities that the residents can use, and there's people on site, of course, to help control, things that are going on within the site. That's why we like the larger sites. And when you get down to the smaller 50-unit type sites, it's harder to manage those because you don't have enough units to have those amenities at that place, to have on-site management, to be there on a daily basis controlling those types of things. So definitely it's an asset to have a bigger site. We've done much bigger sites than this, in other areas where we've been. Typically traffic, it's interesting, I did traffic studies myself where we had people out counting every day for several days in the peak periods, and it's interesting that the people in the apartment sites, they really are spread out through the day. It's not like everybody leaves that site at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and they're gone. There's not that kind of flow. We saw traffic counts as low as about 6 cars per minute, and that only happened once in the peak period in the morning and the peak period at night. So if you sit here for a minute and watch 6 cars, that's a long time. So traffic doesn't tend to be a huge issue when it comes to these bigger sites. But anyway, certainly glad to answer any questions that you may have of us. So.
I thank you, Mr. Bieda. And under our discussion, the plan commissioners may have questions then, and we may call you back at that time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on the proposed rezoning? Does anyone else have anything to say about the proposed rezoning? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this proposal? All right, hearing none, we close the public hearing. And we go on to item number 8, discussion recommendation, a request for zoning amendment from Steve Bieda of Mullen Associates for the purpose of changing the zoning of parcel 24607140734-025 owned by Robert Mangen from single-family residential R14 to multifamily R312. And plan commissioners, you have in front of you a prepared motion, and again, this is written in their affirmative. Plan Commission motion 2272, recommendation to City Council for zoning amendment, parcel 246-0714-0734-025 by Robert Mangen, owner, and Mao and Associates petitioner. This motion sets forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes. The request to rezone the property between Rock Creek Apartments Development and Tyranena Park Road from R14 Single Family Residential to R312 Multifamily. A review by city staff and consultants, tonight's public hearing and Plan Commission review. This motion does provide for Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to approve the requested rezoning following procedures set forth in Chapter 660 of the zoning regulations. Is there anyone who wants to make a motion at this time? We can discuss later.
We need a motion to discuss, correct?
We should.
So I'll move to discuss, or I'm sorry, move to approve PC motion 22-7-2, recommendation for zoning amendment parcel 246-0714-0734-025.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Mrs. Bishop and seconded by Dr. Mason to approve motion 2272. Now it's open for discussion. Plan commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Or does anyone have questions of the planners or of Mao and Associates, of Mr. Bieda?
I have a question. In some of our other developments, what is the customary buffer of single family between multifamily and, I mean, you know how we,
Sure.
have buffer zones with multifamily and then residential off of industrial? What is is it based on lineal feet? Is it based on number of roads? I'm just curious on.
There are a variety of mechanisms in the zoning code that can provide buffer. There is extended setbacks when you're transitioning from non-residential to single-family or non-residential to residential, and then also from multifamily to single-family. The other is we have specific requirements in the zoning code related to landscaping and screening. So we try to do a combination of things with this where it's a little different than like a manufacturing building where you have to worry about certain noises, et cetera. So you're trying to get more separation. You don't have to worry about, as one of the neighbors had said, a very tall building next to a shorter building where your kind of privacy is lost. So we try to do a combination of things where we have greater setbacks and then where we have fencing and landscaping to provide a visual break and to have materials that will absorb more sound, landscaping materials. Now, again, that takes a few years to grow in. The most recent development that we've had that was multifamily was a little further down the road. And again, we explored combinations of distance and landscaping screening. Much smaller site, though. It was only a few acre site. So the code does spell that out. And it is something that is evaluated as they go through the design review process to make sure that what are found to be concerns, such as an intensive use next to a less intensive use, are being addressed.
Well, the reason I ask is I pretty much know everyone in the crowd, so I respect their comments based on their property and their property values. However, to the north there, the distance, I'm just guessing, more than 1,000 feet?
Are you talking
to the existing buildings from
God.
Highway V?
I would hate to say a number and be absolutely wrong.
No, I'm just guessing. I'm just saying it's a long way.
If you give me a second, I can tell you.
I guess where I'm going with this is, in fairness to the property owners, if there were if there were 3 streets with 6 layers of housing, and there was one more apartment building, would it affect their property? That's where I'm going with it. I'm just throwing it out there, not trying to create additional traffic for them. However, I've done some work on some of the people in the audience and for some of the people in the audience, and it's a long way to the existing apartments, and I'm just wondering if they would notice one more multifamily. I'm just trying to decide what the accurate buffer zone should be in multifamily based on this application.
I think it's a very fair point if, again, these are existing residents, so something new coming in is obviously very startling, right? If you moved in after the apartments were there, right, you would know that they were there and you could make that decision.
Exactly.
Whether that's, 2 rows of new housing, single-family housing behind the existing houses, or, because that's 300 to 400 feet, looking at Mr. Bieda on that one. 150-foot depth of lot, another 60-odd feet for a road right-of-way, and another 150 feet, you're getting into that 375 to 400-foot range. Is that enough to offset? I don't know, and I think there's always design issues that come into this. I would say the concept that was provided was more of a yield plan. Here's what we could get into there. I wouldn't say that that is something that would have passed our requirements for design, right? So to your point on, is it one more building to the south or 2 more buildings to the south of the existing? Is that sufficient? I would say it would probably come down to the design details, right? There's a lot of topography there. So, if you're on one side of the ridge with single family and the other side with multifamily, is that acceptable? Again, you'd have to, I think people would need something to react to say whether they would feel that's okay. So I didn't get the impression from the comments made that people were opposed to new single-family development. It was the amount of multifamily development kind of illustrated on that yield plan.
Correct.
I thought you were going to say something first.
Well, the multifamily apartments went in before I was on the commission. So at that time, was it a suggestion, understanding, zoning, that it would be, this particular parcel would be R1 or single family?
Yes. It was absolutely approved that this parcel as shown here would be single family. A layout was required at that time as part of the planned development district. It showed a loop road and connection, obviously, as you're seeing, kind of out to Tyranena. It was understood that the developer did not want to get into dealing with the single family until his multifamily project was developed. That certainly is understandable, that as he was building from west to east, he was concerned was if there was new single family there, that they may be, raising concerns or issues with his approved multifamily project. So he wanted to wait, understandable. The city, and I'm looking at Mr. Wilkie on this, we'd always had planned for single family in this area. There's absolutely a need for more single family in the community. This seemed a logical transition, that anybody moving in there would know that there was multifamily to the north of them. And then again, as it transitions to the existing single family that the residents are here about tonight. So it was approved this way. And of course, any developer, property owner can come in and request a change, and that's what they're requesting.
Okay, so it was approved when, at the time, the multifamily apartments were approved?
Yes.
Is that correct?
It was zoned, so by code in an ordinance, it was zoned R14.
Yep. I was on Plan Commission and on the council, and we took great efforts to make sure that we did make more of an effort for more single family. We understood the use of where the apartments are now was a great use for that, to help shield the rest of the community and get apartments out there, get him a place that he could build on. But we wanted to make sure that more single-family was developed in that area. So it was, both Plan Commission and the council approved that plan.
One thing I'm noticing is that in the current comprehensive plan, when we talk about multifamily, we want to typically discourage developments that are 100 units or more, and also specifically to discourage multifamily and duplex housing exceeding 5 acres. So I note that the lot that's already been built, I believe in previous conversations we've said is greater than 5 acres already. And the current lot that is under consideration today, I looked it up on the property records, it appears to be 15 acres. Is that correct?
On multiple properties.
Okay, so when you say multiple properties, what do you mean?
So again, this is made up of multiple individual properties.
The subject site is 15 acres.
Right, so the
Yes.
parcel under consideration for this
Yes.
motion is 15 acres. So it seems to me that if we were open to a mix of multifamily and single-family housing, especially with the single-family as a buffer, what zoning designation then allows for that? And then how do we control the appropriate mix of those two types of developments on this very large site?
It does go back to, I'll say, an initial concept that is trying to align with the zoning code and the intent of the comprehensive plan for this area. It's why I say the concept that was provided is, I view it as a yield plan. It's how much, could they get on the site. Doesn't mean that, it's a design that that the community would necessarily embrace or approve. Coming back with something that may show some additional multifamily in the north and transitioning to two-family and mixes of two-family and single-family certainly is an option to get a mix of housing types.
Essentially, what we would do is ask them to come back and hit those requirements. And they would make a proposal to us on how they would do the transition, and we would review it and then send it to Plan Commission for how it would be zoned.
We've also discussed in this commission, especially in the last couple of meetings, about, I'm going to say mixed neighborhoods, and I know that that's not the proper term in the comprehensive plan, but neighborhoods that include, maybe some retail or other amenities. And what was built prior, I wasn't here when that happened, but other developments in the city don't really reflect the considerations and conversations that we've been having since I've been here. And certainly the proposed change of this parcel to multifamily doesn't reflect that either. So those are the two considerations that I'm really thinking about in making this decision. And then I think as we're moving forward in the comprehensive plan and our discussion later tonight as well, we need to have serious thought and consideration as to how does this parcel and others like it in our city meet our criteria and our needs for the city and for our residents. Mm-hmm. And for our developers, not trying to leave them out, but.
Planning commissioners, are there any other comments or questions? It's been moved by Mrs. Bishop and seconded by Dr. Mason to pass motion 2272. Any further discussion? All right, if not, then we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Mr. Foster?
No.
Mr. Coots?
Nay.
Mrs. Bishop?
No.
Mr. Holman?
No.
Ms. Lasars?
No.
Mr. Mason?
Nay.
Motion does not pass. 6-0.
The motion has been
0-6.
denied, and let the record show the reasons that were set forth in the consulting planner's memo. We go on to item number 9, discussion recommendation on zoning ordinance amending section 66056 land use regulations and the matrix of land uses, commercial indoor lodging. And this has been brought by Mrs. Bishop, and And there is an accompanying ordinance that is for consideration by the city council. And this is set forth in our prepared motion, Lake Mills Plan Commission Motion 2273, recommending an ordinance amendment to make commercial indoor lodging a conditional use in zoning districts B1 and PB. This motion sets forth the current permitted status of commercial indoor lodging in B1 downtown business and PB planned business, its conditional use status in R312 multifamily, B2 neighborhood business, I1 industrial, general industrial, PI planned industrial. It sets forth the commercial indoor lodging definitions in the zoning regulations, the differentiation between permitted by right uses and conditional uses requiring public hearing, and the city's obligations regarding consistency and appropriateness in administering zoning district uses. This motion provides for a Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to require conditional use permit for commercial indoor lodging in all applicable zoning districts, specifically B1 and PB. So I like to, Mrs. Bishop, this is something you are proposing, so I like to turn this over to you to talk about what you have proposed.
Okay, sure. So I have the motion before the council, which states some of the definitions and reasoning that I'm bringing this ordinance amendment forward, as well as the attached zoning ordinance amending these matrix of land uses sections. So let me, without restating the motion that is before you, let me talk about why I'm bringing this forward. It's become clear that there's a discrepancy across zoning districts and how commercial indoor lodging is treated in our code and in the matrix of land uses. Now, for our purposes and in our code, commercial indoor lodging is hotels and motels. My proposed ordinance will fix the discrepancy in the matrix of land uses in these zoning districts for commercial lodging, and it will fix and require a conditional use permit in all zoning districts where commercial indoor lodging is permitted, instead of the current unequal treatment across zoning districts. By bringing this motion with my proposed ordinance, I'm seeking Plan Commission action to recommend that the City Council enact this ordinance. A conditional use permit is currently required for commercial indoor lodging in the following districts: District R312, which is multifamily; District B2, which is neighborhood business, think our not downtown, but other business areas in neighborhoods; Industrial 1, which is general industrial; and planned industrial. Again, those are all areas where conditional use permits are currently required for commercial indoor lodging. On its face, it seems like commercial indoor lodging doesn't fit naturally into any of these districts. You wouldn't necessarily think of a hotel in general industrial, hence the CUP requirement. Yet it also doesn't naturally fit into downtown business or planned business districts, and I'll get into some of those reasons why hotels are so different. And I have to say, part of the reason we're making the amendment is because it is currently allowed by right in those areas, as opposed to a conditional use. Let me first tell you what the B1 and planned business districts would encompass and why a CUP would help in these areas. The downtown business district is in our comprehensive plan and our code to promote the rehabilitation and full utilization of existing older structures, and planned business is of a general retail and wholesale nature of offices and service communities. Aren't those also areas where the city and the Plan Commission in its careful, thoughtful development of our city might also want a conditional use permit for commercial indoor lodging? Commercial indoor lodging seems to strike the intersection of business and housing. And it's its own unique category that we should make sure it fits properly in all areas where commercial indoor lodging might be developed. Along with commercial indoor lodging comes increased traffic, both vehicular and pedestrian and visitors, at all hours of the day and week. Other areas that commercial indoor lodging touches on include services within the establishment, such as a gym or a pool, multiple points of building access, which could also span multiple streets, full-time staff, and other considerations. These are different from the businesses they could be located next to, such as a retail establishment that is open during set hours, maybe only during the weekdays or certain hours on the weekends, and they're not open at night. Contrasted with a hotel where you have people coming and going at all hours, and for different reasons and for different services. My ordinance would give the same treatment to all proposed commercial indoor lodging across all zoning districts where it's currently permitted and balance the needs of the city for smart planned growth. We require conditional use permits in many other cases, most recently the Badger lot where they were expanding their development, and Laughing Dogs, which we had, if not the last meeting, a couple of meetings ago. And those are other instances where use has been slightly different than what was currently contemplated. If you think of Laughing Dogs, well, they have a kennel overnight in an industrial area. That's similar to what a hotel might be in an industrial area where conditional use is currently required. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of discussion on this. I probably have a couple other points that we can discuss as they come up, but I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say, and I hope that we recommend this ordinance change to the City Council. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Bishop. Now, Mr. Wilkie, you had written a memo talking about the same issue, and so I'd like to call on you next and to set forth your commentary.
Well, hotels in a planned business or a downtown zone aren't unusual. In fact, they're typically permitted uses across the United States. The concept that you have areas where they're permitted uses, and then you look at where the conditional uses should be, and that's where they have conflicts. That's why B2 and in the industrial zones and the multifamily residential zones have conditional use permits, because then you can adjust to some of the specific conditions that are there. But to make every motel and hotel a conditional use permit is, in my opinion, outside the concept of zoning where you have permitted uses and conditional uses. There should be some places where they are permitted and, or at least handled in a more comprehensive manner than this at this point in time. If you want to look at it and come back and say, okay, our comprehensive plan has reviewed it, we think that this is the way we want to go, I think that's fine. But at this point in time, I just don't see the idea that everything should be a conditional use if it's a motel being consistent with the way zoning is typically done.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilkie. Plan commissioners, do you have any impressions regarding this this matter, and what your impressions may be concerning the status of use that an indoor lodging facility should have in downtown or in planned business?
I have a question. Maybe I just couldn't hear you real clear. Where's the major area of concern? Where would we be kind of hung out to dry, so to speak, with our current zoning? And the reason I ask that is I'm really also kind of a proponent of permitted uses. However, I do not fear conditional uses, just because I've said it a million times on tape. A conditional use is a use based on conditions that we apply, so we can revoke them. So I'm not against that either. I just would like to be just a little more specific. Thank you.
Right, so the two areas of concern specifically are the two that currently allow commercial indoor lodging by permitted use, and we would change that to a conditional use. And those two areas are B1, which is business downtown, and planned business. And I think specifically in business downtown, you know, Mr. Wilkie said, well, people don't usually do it in business downtown in cities because you want to have people be able to put in a hotel. Our city is so small and unique, and to have a hotel go in by right, I think it would be really a detriment to some of our planning to let that happen and not have a little bit more insight and control over the process to make sure it really fits in with what we want our downtown to look like. In regard to the planned business, a part of this is streamlining the process for all commercial indoor lodging so that it's just a CUP across the board and everybody knows what to expect. But also when you think of, a regular retail establishment, do they want a hotel coming in where there's going to be people in and out 24/7, increased traffic, a large parking footprint? Does that fit in a planned business district? I think that's something that this plan commission would want to see. And again, relating to the footprint of our city, I think it's right and natural that we would want to do that here. Like not Madison or other places.
Now that I understand it, I think there is something to that, and here's why. On my street, College Street, years ago, we were zoned R3. I think College, Fremont, a good section there because there were a lot of duplexes in the area. So what could have happened at that time is a big developer could have came around and bought a whole block, bought all the houses, ripped them down, and by right built a monster multifamily in the middle of a mixed residential and a bunch of duplexes. So maybe this does have a little traction more than the likes of a Watertown where there are hotels downtown, or there had been in the past, a bigger city. So this might have this, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I mean it in a positive manner, that looking out for, our existing downtown as it is. This may make more sense than I once thought. Any comments on that, Dustin?
Yes, I understand Ms. Bishop's concerns with that. I would say that communities such as Cedarburg, Wisconsin, which has a very historic downtown, or Port Washington, Wisconsin, which has a very historic downtown, allow commercial indoor lodging. They have the Port Hotel, they have the Harborside, there's the Washington House. They allow them by right. They have other areas, and we have a code that's, I'll say, we've had a lot of conversations with the code. It protects in these instances, right? There are maximum heights. There are, in the case of the downtown, there is a maximum building setback to make sure that you're maintaining the historic character. If someone wants to exceed these things and not comply with our design guidelines, et cetera, they would be grounds for denial. Enabling these uses, as Mr. Wilkie said, in certain uses, the planned business, which is generally along the interstate, county roads, state roads, et cetera, where the traffic's intended to handle it, and you would generally have a larger footprint. That would probably be the more traditional model of a hotel is likely. In a downtown setting, it could be the conversion of an existing building to allow for lodging. The intention at the time was to try to enable those things and then rely on the other codes and ordinances to ensure that the character and requirements were maintained. That being said, what Mr. Holman said about a conditional use is just that. It's an ability to ensure the scrutiny you want to apply is there and to impose conditions that you may feel are necessary to address ancillary impacts. So it's not inappropriate. It's just, again, it's another hoop, I'll say, to jump through, a public hearing and a process. So it is not inappropriate to go that way. I just wanted to give some understanding of why we had it the way we did when we wrote the code a number of years ago, and I would say how some other communities apply it that I would say are akin to Lake Mills, kind of peer communities. At no point were we looking at this in the sense of a Madison, a Milwaukee, a Waukesha, right? But the application of other peer-type communities. Now, some communities, you mentioned Watertown, I would say it's probably not been as great about ensuring the character of development in certain areas has met with the expectation maybe of residents. But I would say that if someone wants to locate here with a hotel or motel, I wouldn't say that a conditional use is going to be a prohibitive step for them. And if it provides that level of, I'll use comfort, that the community is able to scrutinize it in a way that it wants to, I'm certainly not going to say it, I wouldn't be supportive of it.
I'm going to make a couple comments about downtown. So downtown, if you're going to do anything substantial, you're going to do it by PDD, which is even tougher than a conditional use permit, unless you're buying an existing building and converting it, which what are you going to use downtown to convert? So the next question is, so you wouldn't get what you were talking about on Fremont and College. It just wouldn't happen. Now, on the PB, you're going to get bigger buildings, but those are all up around the interstate, which is where you would expect to see those types of buildings. The flip, going to the conditional use permit, when we had conditional use permits, and this was an issue back when I got here, and why the council made the change that they did when they did, which Ms. Lazaris was part of, is that when you came for a conditional use permit in Lake Mills, you got hung with everything under the sun under certain conditions. And so it became a very difficult process to be able to get through the Plan Commission to get to the council without some very unusual processes. So we had some unusual conditions that happened up around the interstate at that point in time. And so while we hope that that doesn't happen through a conditional use process, it has, and it has the potential to be that way. So at least having the ability to have a permitted use in some places is a benefit to those types. And so I understand B2, it's a neighborhood commercial. It's, you know, it's where you're starting to have those conflicts between those two planned businesses, mainly around the interstate and that area, and is an area that should be used for those types of developments. Downtown is clearly different. I agree with Mrs. Bishop on that, but I think that all the design standards that we have in place make it so difficult to develop that type in the downtown. They would have to go through a different method, which would have a lot of scrutiny.
Well, Mr. Wilkie, I agree with many of your observations, and even since way back when we at that time at the council determined that a permitted use would be appropriate in the downtown at what now is referred to as planned business, that at that time we hadn't gone through even the existing comprehensive plan or the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, which, as you pointed out, did provide your design guidelines, your standards that were not necessarily in place as well in the past. I was just reviewing again those, the 66094 non-residential design for site layout, development, and so on. If you were to apply the different design standards and site layout standards that are contained in our zoning ordinance to a permitted indoor lodging facility, and then chances are that there would be many sites that would not be able to sustain that proposal. So, and you also mentioned that planned development district would be an option here, and that has its own set of standards. So I would say I continue to be comfortable with the permitted status of indoor commercial lodging in downtown B1 and in planned business PB. So I would be in favor of staying with the current code in that respect. Plan commissioners, do you have any comments or questions?
What's the difference between bed and breakfast and indoor commercial lodging?
bed and breakfast, sorry. A bed and breakfast has statutory requirements attached to it that they must follow, and you must live, the proprietor must live in the home. And so there is a separate section as it relates to bed and breakfast.
That is an interesting point. If you look at the land use matrix, bed and breakfasts are only permitted by conditional use permit in their respective zoning districts. And arguably, they're less intrusive and obtrusive than a hotel going in permitted by right. They would have less people coming in and out, less occupancy during the day in different seasons than a hotel would. And so I see yet again another discrepancy that would be allowing a hotel to come in possibly downtown permitted by right and not have the same requirements that we would for a much smaller statutorily regulated establishment that requires, as Mr. Wolf said, the proprietor to be there, live there, that type of thing, and have more control over who is coming in and for how long, and general control over their own property.
If I could just counter that very quickly. I feel that Ms. Bishop keeps referring to hotels as being large entities, and they can be small entities. So I want to make sure that there's a distinction that just because we say hotel, it does not mean a 50-room hotel in a downtown setting.
Well, we don't know that necessarily.
Well, the site can only handle so much. The issue that happened with bed and breakfast is traditionally we have more difficulty with bed and breakfast with parking issues and impact to immediate neighbors because they're right next to residences rather than other commercial entities. So that is why conditional use was implemented at the time of the zoning code rewrite, to make sure that those ancillary concerns that you have raised about hotels were definitely being addressed when you are putting a commercial entity in the middle of an established neighborhood.
And downtown specifically, we do have the intermingling of both businesses and residents who would be affected by an establishment such as a hotel, regardless of size, because of the traffic and the people coming in and out. I do want to address another point, and it was that, conditional use permits, maybe the process is too restrictive. We use them frequently, and I think successfully, in these meetings here. We have at least one meeting, I would say, since I've been on this board, maybe not tonight, but I find that we're able to make sure the establishment matches what the city wants. I think back to, the Badger Car Center, and we talked about the setback and the different screening that would be required under a CUP when they were doing their expansion. And again, I thought that was successful for both the city and the developer and the business owner doing it. And it wasn't onerous. I thought it was an amicable process. And so I don't think that argument that, they shouldn't be used in this case really applies, especially given the nature of a hotel and how it is not, the shoe doesn't necessarily fit in all of the districts where we are allowing those establishments.
I always have another comment. I don't have a problem with that as long as the restrictions don't get with what Steve was saying, because I've been on the Plan Commission a long time, and it has gotten out of hand with restrictions. There's absolutely no question. That's one of the reasons I'm on this Plan Commission, or would like to be on this commission. So I could definitely support conditional uses, and as I've been told over and over, we have the ability to change the decisions that we made, and I intend to change some coming up. So
those conditions also, Mr. Holman, are largely, we are helped to evaluate them by the planner in regard to our code and what works. And so we do have, our planner here who would help us in that discussion. And in each memo that we get from the planner regarding conditional uses, there's a list of, I think it's like 8 items of, as long as these things are met, you really have no reason to deny the conditional use permit. And it's really just a check and balance on the establishment and making sure the right things are happening. So I'll leave it at that. I do hope the Plan Commission makes this recommendation to the council. I do think it would streamline just the process across all the districts where commercial lodging is permitted, and I think it would be overall beneficial to our planning and growth here. Thank you.
I just have one comment. I don't disagree with anything you've said. I don't see a problem using conditional use for any of this stuff, but we fought hard for many, many years to get out of the fog of being business unfriendly. And conditional use was one of the biggest things, one of the biggest drivers that made us a community that was considered business unfriendly, and that word got out there, and we weren't able to direct any businesses into our community at all. It was hard to fill buildings, we couldn't sell lots, so just something to consider when we talk about moving to conditional use for everything.
All right.
This is kind of a broad question for staff, and I'm sorry that I don't have it more specific, but just going down the column for the planned business district, there's some things that are permitted by right and there's some things that are conditional use. And when you go down that column, why isn't everything just permitted by right in a planned business district? Why is it okay to have an art gallery? You need a conditional use for auto body repair, but building maintenance services is by right, but car washes are only by condition. What's the line as you're looking down that column to figure out where it should fall?
A lot of time was spent on this. A lot of time was spent on this with the commission at the time we were rewriting it. The last code was not very clear on how certain uses would be handled. And there were things in the last code that were permitted by right that did have spillover impacts on adjacent properties or neighborhoods. So many things that you see that are automotive related seem to be conditional use because auto body places have storage of wrecked vehicles, they have noise at different hours, they have smells and sounds associated with painting, et cetera. So automotive things have that kind of associated with it. And they don't always have to be on a large site. It's easy in an industrial park where they have a lot of acreage, provide buffering. Some of these activities, Topals is a beautiful redevelopment, but remember the old Topals, it was a lot of activity in a small site, right? They're an important local business, but we want to make sure that we're providing screening, et cetera, and the current code kind of enables that. So when you're going through that, it's really what is the potential impact on the neighbors, or is it things that the neighbors should have the ability to come in and weigh in on before it gets blessed, before it starts operating, right? There are checks in the code that if there's a vacant commercial site, that it does have to get evaluated from a zoning perspective to make sure the building can handle it, parking operations, et cetera, and then the building code, right, change of occupancy, the building inspectors look at it. But there were certain activities that could come in that felt that we need to make sure we're looking at it comprehensively, not to kind of beat on that word, and to make sure that the public could weigh in.
Yep, thank you.
Those sound like exactly the reasons I would accept this ordinance. And noting that we don't have a hotel here, if we get one or two in and it's working and we realize our code is working as it's supposed to and we don't need the additional scrutiny or public comment, we can change it again.
So Steve, you had recommended tabling this. Can you help us understand your thoughts?
Well, like Dustin said the last time you went through and you guys picked out kind of what was spilling over and what wasn't, some of the things that impacted what became conditional use as a not. And when you went through and did the comprehensive review, you kind of filled those blanks in. I would think that would be the reason again. For tabling it is to give yourself the time to go through this comprehensive plan, review it. I think this group has been more active in reviewing the comprehensive plan than the previous one. So it's probably going to get a lot more opinion. She's right, we don't have a hotel. I think our design standards right now would cover everything that the conditional use permit was going to look at anyways. So why make the change now? Take a couple hotels and then flip it back and if you think that's the problem. But I think the way the design code's working, we get complaints about that it's way too tough, not that it's too lenient. And so I think that adding the conditional use permit process to it just adds time and adds the opportunity for things to be weighed that may not need to be weighed or considered.
Well, Plan Commissioners, I too would be in favor of tabling this at this time. I would be curious to see this in the future, and I would like to maybe revisit this another time, and like you mentioned, Mr. Wilkie, that once we get through the comprehensive plan process, and I assume that we're going to also be revisiting the zoning ordinance after the comprehensive plan is adopted, as some things may come through that would lead us to examining the zoning code again. And so I would be interested in Mrs. Bishop's idea at a later time. So I'd like to maybe keep that for now, and I think this is an idea worth reviewing at a later time once we continue our reviews of the comprehensive plan, and I would guess also a zoning ordinance review is going to be coming up. So, and we'll again go through the matrix of land uses and think about what would be appropriate as permitted and conditional. So I too would be in favor of tabling. Now, Plan Commissioners, are there any other things that anyone wants to talk about regarding this this proposal?
I don't have any other discussion, but I do have a motion. I would move to approve Plan Commission Motion 22-7-3, recommending an ordinance amendment to make commercial indoor lodging a conditional use in zoning districts B1 and PB. Can you say that again? Yes, I move to approve Plan Commission Motion 22-7-3.
All right, very good.
What is it?
Did we not make a motion
No, I don't have it in my notes. I don't believe we did.
prior to this? So we don't have a motion on the table regarding this already? Okay, all right, Mr. Wilkie says no. Okay, Mrs. Bishop has moved, is there a second?
I don't know what the motion is.
It's to accept, it's to pass this motion, which will, yeah, it will make a recommendation to the council in favor of changing the status of indoor commercial lodging from permitted to conditional for downtown and for planned business. So that's what this motion is what it does. It's a recommendation to the council.
It's just my motion that was on the agenda.
So, and Mrs. Bishop has made a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
That's what I introduced. Okay.
Does anyone wish to make a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Mrs. Bishop and seconded by Mr. Foster to pass motion 2273. Any further discussion?
I moved the previous question. Oh, I was calling the previous question to go ahead and vote,
All right.
since it seems like we
Oh,
already had the discussion, so we kind of went a little backwards.
Okay, very good. All right. In that case, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Mr. Coots?
Nay.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Holman,
Aye.
Ms. Lasares,
No.
Mr. Mason,
Nay.
Mr. Foster.
No.
Motion fails 2-6.
All right. All right, very well. Where? We at least, yes, we can take a break, but,
I'm sorry, 2-4.
oh, yes, very well. All right, thank you. All right, yes, I see that people would be interested in a break, and we'll take a 5-minute break now and continue with the discussion on the comprehensive plan update. All right. We resume our Plan Commission meeting this evening of July 26th. And we are on item 10, discussion on comprehensive plan update. So I'll turn that over to our consulting planners.
Thank you, Ms. Lazares. So all these materials are available on the city's website for anybody who wants to follow at home. Initially, we're just going to talk very quickly about schedule. Schedule has slid a little bit in the sense that we pushed back some of the public involvement activities. You can see that we're kind of like in the meat of the plan study. We've focusing on land use at this point, and we've preliminarily provided some stuff on utilities, community facilities. But schedule is being directed by you, so we're just using it as a framework to make sure that all the pieces are aligning as you feel that they should to talk about complementary issues. Briefly about public involvement, last month, as you recall, we walked through all the results of the survey at that time. The survey had been open for a couple of months. We received 700 some respondents, and those. Ms. Bishop had asked about the full listing of all comments, et cetera. That has been provided and is available online for everyone to see. But it has any of the open-ended questions, has any comment that was made by the respondents. So that's been provided. I want to make it known that the public comment form is still available. Just because the survey is closed, if you will, people can still comment in writing, and they can, of course, provide emails to the city staff, to the council, to the plan commissioners on any issues and concerns that they have. But then there's also a public comment form that is available online, and hard copies are available at City Hall daily. So I just want to make sure people know about that. We'll talk about the focus groups in a second as well, but just as a follow-up to last month's discussion, we're still coordinating on getting kind of this larger business focus group together. We ran into kind of this problem of holidays and people's vacations and getting some things sorted with staff. So we're still working on getting those scheduled, but that should be forthcoming. So just real quick, again, key takeaways on the public survey. We're not walking through things in detail. There's a lot to absorb, and we, of course, encourage you to continually revisit the survey as you are reviewing chapters, which is, of course, what we are doing when we are giving you red lines to weigh in on what the respondents have told us. Obviously, more single-family homes are desired, more neighborhood parks, but maintain community parks. Key priority is maintaining Lake Mills's identity and character. Walkable daily amenities are important. Business park and economic development activities are divisive. We're going to talk about that in the land use discussion. Broad support for more trails, connecting parks and the Glacial Drumlin Trail. People love that Lake Mills is easy to drive in. It's moderately easy to bike in. And so again, you've seen responses that let's make sure that we're connecting things. And overwhelming, the city needs to communicate and listen more. We've heard that through some of the comments of the general comments that came in. And of course, I hit the wrong button. So give me a second. The focus group meetings. We met with a number of the groups, and online is the detailed summary of each of the focus groups. So civic organizations, local realtors and developers, the intergovernmental groups, environmental organization focus groups. So again, lots of detail in here and kind of key takeaways or summary. I'm not going to run through this. I'm just going to hit some highlights in the slideshow, but I want to make sure that everybody's aware of this. It is online and can be read, but it's multiple pages, very detailed to try to go through, I think, in this setting right now. But we will always reference back to comments that have been made by those who participated in the focus group so far. They were handled over 2 separate days last month. But some of the key takeaways. Everybody wants more communication from the city. They want more transparency on things that are going on in the city, and again, coupled with communication. I think there was regular comments on, oh, I didn't know that happened or that was available. You know, in the public survey, we asked how people get their information. It is generally through social media accounts, et cetera, and then online. But making sure things are front and center, and that the city is reaching out to the public through its social media sites, that it has much more presence from the social media end to let people know about things. There was comments on some shortcomings, if you will, with customer service. There's that need that when people come to the city, come to City Hall or working with city staff, and including consultants, that there is this focus on customer service, helping them understand processes, helping them understand their concerns, and helping them to outline potential alternatives if their specific concern can't be addressed in the way that they want it to. So again, you can see those 3 are very big issues that need to be tackled, I say, throughout the comprehensive plan, about how are we making sure that public is involved and public is informed, and that processes are very transparent and straightforward. Lack of housing of all types came from the focus groups. So I know in the survey there's division on multifamily versus not multifamily, but business organizations are saying we need multifamily because we need workers. We need places for people to live here, and that was brought up. So there certainly is a need for multifamily, single family and affordable housing. That was reiterated. The issue that we heard from realtors, while things sell readily, there isn't a lot to sell. And what we heard from the developers is there isn't enough platting of lots, not just in Lake Mills, but in Jefferson County. There is kind of an all-time low of lots being platted, according to the Department of Administration platting information. There are concerns when you read the housing chapter about the cost to develop lots is overwhelming. Generally, developers are taking a loss on lots to ensure that they can still build the houses. But the cost of building or developing lots grows exponentially for them. Materials, the availability of materials, and labor to do the projects. The comment here on public funding prioritization and shortfalls. This is a very short statement on a pretty complex issue that was raised by civic groups on how dollars are being spent. There are concerns about the community center. There's that issue between the city owning facilities and the school district responsible for programming, that there is this desire that the decision makers at the city, the council, become more involved in working with these organizations and helping them understand how dollars can be spent and what the long-term plans are for public facilities. And then the prioritization issue goes to why are certain like roadway or utility projects happening before certain other facility projects are occurring. So when you read through the section with the civic groups, you'll see that they want more involvement from the elected officials, and they want more accessibility from city staff at whether it's attending events or attending meetings and groups broadly, not just city manager, but broadly, that more department staff is involved in their organizations. The next two kind of go hand in hand here. Again, there are concerns about applying ordinances, codes and ordinances, enforcement of codes and ordinances, and where leniency is available or isn't being provided on codes and ordinances. I say that goes hand in hand with overwhelmingly protect what makes Lake Mills, its identity and its character. Those are challenging issues. So that is something, I say, a recurring theme that is going to have to be grappled with here by the Plan Commission and ultimately the council with the comprehensive plan, is how do you maintain the character and the identity of the community without setting the bar in a certain place and maintaining the bar and enforcing the bar of development expectations. This is a big challenge. And then overwhelmingly, we need to prioritize Rock Lake preservation and announce it. There's this issue that everybody certainly talks about the value and the importance of these environmental assets, the lake, of course, but there is concerns from those groups that it's kind of something said, but people aren't, it's like not always, there's not a big public relations boost to it. They want more involvement again from elected officials in these organizations. And so those are kind of fleshed out in the summary we've provided, but making sure that their expectations and the community's expectations are articulated and that there's kind of consensus and alignment on how to move forward with those issues, especially when there are enforcement problems and development issues as it relates to environmental assets. Next one is improvements to Commons Park. And I will talk kind of Commons Park and downtown. The downtown businesses have expressed, we would really like to have a downtown plan, streetscaping plan, et cetera, so as improvements are happening, they can be incorporated incrementally over many, many years. I think this goes back to, I'll say, transparency and communication coming from the city, that there is a updated Commons Park master plan that was developed a few years ago, and some were aware of it and some weren't, that these things need to be more front and center on the website so people can get to these materials and see these documents. Broader involvement of groups or outreach to groups about these things. That one was spearheaded by the Parks Board, and they certainly did talk to very key organizations around the downtown as it related to the usage of Commons Park. But again, that goes back to the communication transparency issue.
Did you get a feeling for what kind of improvements they want in the Commons Park?
Oh, they were talking about, they understand the balance that it's intended, Commons Park is not intended to be a park in the sense of Wallace Park with ball fields, et cetera. They love that there's going to be and continue to be the ice skating, winter programming issues. Love to hear that there is plans for improved restroom facilities and concessions and accessibility, improved walkways and such. But again, it goes back to, I think that many weren't aware of the updated park master plan. So, not that there was negative comments on it, it's just, it was more of a, we didn't know in some of the groups. Again, the business groups have told us about the challenges in attracting employees. It goes back to housing. It goes back to availability of workforce and such. But it is important to make sure that it's at the forefront of thinking here to them. The impact of new development on existing businesses is certainly a concern. Many have said, we need to make sure that there is a true sense of arrival into Lake Mills, improved signage. There was talks about the south end, which is a little challenging as you're growing. Kind of know when you come into Lake Mills, when you come off the interstate, but when you come from the other directions, it's not as pronounced. Again, the Rock Lake Activity Center staff talked about that. And then the intergovernmental group really talked about shared services and cooperation, and we will talk about that as we go through certain chapters and elements. But there's, by many and overwhelming, the governments and entities, school districts, et cetera, have this obviously desire to share services and to cooperate on things, but there are still hurdles associated with some of them related to some past actions from the city in their mind. So there's more detail on that in that section. So
One thing I found that was kind of interesting in there is they recommended a city council member for the civic groups. Has
Yeah.
anybody ever seen a community do that? How in the world
I
would that
think-
work unless they were non-voting?
So some of the groups were like the lake groups said we would love to have, a council member on the board. Others were, and I think it's very common in communities where the elected officials just are participants in the civic groups, or they're members of the civic groups. And so from the civic groups, it was they would love to see more council representation on things to improve communication between the groups and prioritization. And the other was that at public events, et cetera, city staff and council members should be more available, whether it's a tent at the farmer's market, or at Town and Country Days, or whatever it is that handful knew who the elected officials were or the department heads were, but many didn't, and they want to know who to go to for things and have those open dialogue.
That's fine to,
Need more time.
that's fine to ask that, but can you imagine the time these people are, they're not full-time, employees of the city. I'm just a appointed member of the Plan Commission, and I have a hard time getting stuff done along with making a living. I can't imagine asking council people to be on every single civic group, and where would they possibly get the time?
These
I mean,
are
it's a
things,
great, it's a great request.
It
However,
is. These are things that I think should be thought of as we move forward in chapters and thinking about how could or where could certain, I'll say staff or elected or appointed officials be involved. Maybe it's something that becomes a greater priority in intergovernmental cooperation or cooperating with the civic groups. Again, I don't say I have answers to this, but these are the issues that they would love, that they are raising to us. And so these are things to be grappled with as we move forward with a plan.
Thank you.
we can't even get the public to come to the meetings when we ask them. I think it's asking a lot. It's a great to hear it and all, but wow, how much more could they ask of city staff? Every time I've come down, the city staff has always made time. However, their desks are full. How could they do more, like staff alone? And it's just an amazing request. Amazing request.
I'm looking to the person to my left on that because it's a big challenge when it comes to, operating city and being available. And yes, it's a challenge.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the focus group stuff? I know I ran through it rather quickly, but I did want to be able to get into the red line of the chapter on future land use, on goals, objectives, and policies. So not trying to truncate it, we can always revisit it, but I feel that injecting what came out of the public involvement activities into our discussion is going to be the most important piece. So the PowerPoint runs through some things that we've seen before. I do want to shift to, talks about the projections and the land use numbers and that type of stuff. We've talked about that. I do want to shift to the land use chapter and the redlining. Again, this is available online. We tried to prompt in the right column with our commentary or questions related to things. There are things here that were just some semantical changes from mixed residential to calling it multifamily residential. But there are places where feedback is going to be necessary from you. And how do you feel is the best way to go through this for you? To really focus on where we have questions and comments on things, and ask you to, if there are specific things or issues you have on pages, to bring them to our attention, or where the red line you agree or don't agree. It is a jumping off point. It is not etched in stone. It is, the redlining is intended to either update current information or current, whether it's demographic information or land use data or whatnot, and then related to policies and programs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd want to focus on your questions that you might have,
Okay.
not the whole darn
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So as you recall, the way this is set up, the first part of the chapter is really background update, and we've had that available to you for a number of months. I'm going to ask us to skip down to page 5. We have a comment about land sales and changes in value and such. Is this data that you would like to see in here? Do you find that provides some context to a reader as to, it is kind of a point in time.
Yeah, it's outdated as soon as you print it.
And that was my comment. I think that was the inkling, does actually call out that it's an informal selection of sales as well. And I think it's useful for some context, but I think being so specific here probably is not needed. So that was the thought.
So is this data available anywhere in an updated form that could be linked to?
We would have to pull it.
Just have to be pulled no matter what?
Yeah,
Okay.
we talk with the realtors to see what they're saying, or we look at land sales to see what, I'll say, vacant land has been selling for.
Yeah.
And
Is this
it-
data you get from DOR?
MLS and the county register of deeds
Okay,
tells us, near the recent sales of properties.
got it.
Yeah, market rate versus assessed.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it needs to be in there because it is just that point in time and it is outdated as soon as you write it. I would give them references to look if they want to look themselves, if we can.
Sure. One thought I just had is that once the comprehensive plan is adopted, wouldn't it be all right to have, go through an annual, just an automatic annual, and bring it to our attention to show what would happen to us in the council, but then show what the factual updates are on an annual basis. So we see here, we see the cost of undeveloped land. A year from now, it would be all right, in my view, to show the updated information, but then you would then, at that time, say, this is the updated information to the comprehensive plan. It would just be like a list.
Okay.
And then it could be all approved as a package and say, well, that's fine, those are the updated figures.
So if I'm hearing you, like maybe like an annual review of the city, here have been some recent sales of land, here's what it went for, here are a number of building permits that were issued.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would be okay, in my view, to have that sort of update, and it would just be, it would be facts. It would be, like here, there's an undeveloped lot cost, it would be the update of what that is. And for the, a year from now, the building permits from 2022, and by category.
Does the city already have an annual report?
Those things are recorded, yeah.
Because if that's the case, I don't know that we would need to go through and update a planning document with new figures year after year after year.
We have a federal report that we have to fill out on certain types of building permits.
Yep.
But it's not the same. And the actual report that we have is a pretty extensive list of every type of permit. So, you know, you get your furnace replaced, so it's not necessarily about sales and that type of thing.
How useful even is it to a developer? They're gonna seek out their land, they're not gonna go by something on a chart that we pretend that we know.
The other thing is building permits historically don't include a lot of information on them. So the guy who comes in and fills out the first part of the building permit only fills out the part that he's doing. So the actual total cost of the house might be 2 times more, because then the HVAC guy and the electric and then the cost of the lot and all that's all separate. So it's kind of hard. Generally, the county keeps a more accurate piece of information, and I think the original suggestion of giving them where they can get the information.
We should just eliminate the page, put a line through it.
We have to, the chapter have to have a brief discussion of trends. It's gray as to what that means, and so it certainly is easier to provide direction to people on where they can find updated information.
Right,
That may be
Certainly, yeah.
beneficial.
In lieu of.
Yeah, yeah, that would be
Lieu
good
of.
too, that, to show where you can get more recent information, you could do that. Or, you know, if you see, or, you know, what's to say that in 5 years, if you see something and go, well, that really could stand to be updated, the set of facts, well, fine, you know, it wouldn't have to be everything. It would be as things might be noticed, that it would be, oh, well, that, we could stand to update that.
Yeah, every
and
few
if it
years.
doesn't
I'm
matter,
sorry.
it wouldn't matter.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to speak over you, Pat.
Sorry.
I was going to say every few years, obviously the U.S. Census Bureau updates its data, and so that gives you, I'll say, better like population numbers and such. Obviously, every year the Wisconsin Department of Administration updates its population numbers. You know, some certain level of accuracy, but I think if we want to provide direction, I think that would work on how to find some of this. But
Yeah.
Then we would just have to
that would.
update the references as they
Yeah.
change for locations to find it.
They change a lot less than the other information.
You're right, yeah, you're exactly right.
And seeing as long as the statute, you know, the statutes require that we put this information in, just listing it that way and letting them figure out how to update it is better than us trying to.
I would agree.
Okay, with that I'm going to move along. So this is the discussion on density of new development, because we're using some of this density to make acreage projections. The 4 units an acre is in keeping with what the new Tyranena Point development has been. We have talked in the past about kind of the character of lot sizes within Lake Mills. Again, the stuff around the downtown is smaller. Those are generally 1/8 acre. So think 8 units an acre versus 8 units per acre versus 4 units per acre. This also gets into the issue that how do we handle this for new development? Should more density be allowed or encouraged? The R14 is I'll say our largest single-family district, meaning requiring the largest lot size. We have not historically encouraged development under the R16 or the R18 standards, but based on what you're hearing from the development community, that it's expensive to build, right, to put in infrastructure, more lots per, foot helps offset that cost, But that also means more dwelling units, right? What's a comfortable density?
Yeah, I don't know. You feel, once you get up there, you feel like you're crammed up in everybody else's space.
Right, it depends on the person, you know.
Market.
Some may be very comfortable
Yeah,
with,
that's true.
in an R18 or an R28 area, and that's fine. And some may feel, well, you know, I think the key is that, you know, there's, through the comprehensive planning process, that, and, you know, later, you know, looking at zoning, that there are a range of residential land uses that people can find what they like. You know, some will say, I really want space, so I can't really be in anything less than a R14. Or someone might say, well, I like to have mixed residential, so I'd like to be in a planned development district.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Plan Commission is uncomfortable if a developer came in and said, the market says this is the product, you know, a 8,000 square foot property or a 7,000 square foot property. And we have zoning districts that enable that because we apply them to the older area, the historic area of the community. But we have not allowed new single-family development to use those districts. We've required the R14, which is a larger lot size. So this is a bigger conversation that, is the Plan Commission comfortable letting the developer decide, if it just says single family, that we would enable them to use smaller lot sizes if they feel that that's what the market can bear?
Oh, certainly.
I wouldn't know why
Certainly.
not.
Yeah, of course.
It's an important conversation. Let's look at the parcel that just came in, right? That was asking, that it was R14. If a developer came in and said, I want to do 8,000 square foot or 7,000 square foot properties there, properties around it are generally 10, 12, 20,000 square feet.
They have to be 20.
That's in the town, but in ours, they'd have to be 10. So this gets back to how much land do you really need to plan for? More density means you have to plan for less land.
We also have to consider what fits and is in keeping with our current look and design. And again, I think it's a mix of neighborhoods, it's a mix of lot sizes. Just because you have an R14 doesn't mean you also wouldn't have a bigger lot in that area, a third of an acre lot, as long as the density is round about the same in that sort of neighborhood. So I think R14 really is standard. I think people, especially, you know, a couple blocks away from a downtown, anticipate a quarter of an acre lot in a city. Certainly smaller if you're looking at apartments or if you're looking at a single family turned duplex or something. But I'm comfortable with R14. I'm hearing people going in different directions, so I don't know if I agree yet.
I can tell you, Arbor Creek is an interesting development in that form, in that it was a planned design district, Pam, as you remember, and a lot of the lots are 6,500 to 8,000 square feet. We put the 10,000 square footers up against the existing development, and then,
Exactly.
but we provided a lot of open space around it. So the bike trail and the area there, and then the community parks that they're around provided a lot of open space to compensate for the smaller lot. So it's not quite what Dustin's talking about. Catherine talked a little bit earlier, and is an interesting concept that I think he called it planned neighborhoods, but if I remember correctly, we talked about it as traditional neighborhoods,
Yes. Yeah,
which
traditional.
blends a lot more of the types of uses together. And we haven't ever looked at that and we haven't received those types of requests either. But But that's a more interesting concept moving into the future because housing is going to get harder and harder to purchase. I mean,
So that discussion, yes, the planned neighborhood is intended, future land use district is intended to have this blend of housing types we talked about last month. It's important to note, when we updated the zoning code, we included a section on traditional neighborhood development. You, as a community of your size, are not required by law to have that kind of code on the books. You do when you're at 10,000 square feet, 10,000 people? 10,000 people?
yeah.
Sorry
Well,
there.
we've exceeded that.
Still got lot sizes. Yes, sorry. 10,000 people in population. But we felt, because we were writing the zoning code at that time, and it was an important principle from the last comprehensive plan, that we included it. It has not been used to date, but the code requirements that align with what's required by state statute is on the books. So we do have the mechanism to make that happen in place.
To Mr. Wilkie's point, the reason we haven't seen developers asking for things that look like a traditional neighborhood is because the best bang for their buck is certainty in planning. They have the same design, across 4 different buildings. They know exactly the square footage. They buy all the same materials. They get a discount on doing that. So it's not necessarily in a developer's interest to build in a way, especially if we're looking not for infill in our town or city, but we're looking for expansive development. It's not in their interest to build in a way that would replicate what our downtown and our historic neighborhoods look like.
Yeah, because, well, we were talking about it earlier, developers are the builders now. So it's not like they're going to buy the property and then look for builders. So
that's why cities our size struggle so much with getting new lots platted, is because the cost of platting lots is so expensive.
Yes.
So you'll note that's, they either want a TID to go along with it, or they want the city to plat it. So Brookstone, where
they
we've
want
been
the
doing
city
those,
to help put the infrastructure
we
in
put it all
and
in
then
for them, and then,
pay for it after.
yeah, they pay for it by special assessment. Now, as the lots sell, we came out really well. Tyranena Point, they had a certain amount of TID infrastructure constructed that helped them through some of their costs, but they didn't get a lot of internal money. But you're going to see a lot more requests for internal money because the cost of, like Dustin said, the cost of materials, water main and services and that type of stuff is so expensive that you just can't get a lot. So when they're looking at cities, they're going to look at Madison and Waukesha because they can get the density they need, whereas they can't turn that over in Lake Mills. So unless the city is willing to help in some form or fashion, you're gonna have a hard time producing lots. And there's always the balance, R14, you have a certain length of lot. So everything that goes along with that, the sidewalk, the street, the curb, the storm, the sanitary, that all costs a certain amount in front of that lot. You make the lot a little bit narrower, you get more units per infrastructure. You also, as a city, get more taxes per lot to pay the infrastructure off. So there's a balance there when you look at it. And so when we historically did the last comprehensive plan, we laid out those little charts with how much of each type of development we would be willing to look at in the area. And that kind of tied all those concepts together because you make, as far as taxes, you make more money on this versus that, and those types of things.
And we will have a whole housing chapter to really get into the minutia of some of that. Big picture here is we just need an understanding from you is what should we be using for kind of a net density to determine how much growth acreage we need. We're suggesting here a very comfortable 4 units an acre, which aligns with your R1. That's a net density. Some areas may be a little more dense, some areas may be a little less dense, but to have an idea of how much land we need to accommodate in future land use, we work from a density number.
I would just look at what you have today and do your projection from that. If it changes, it changes, but you don't have a picture of the future and what happened. And you can't say, well, this is what happened 5 years from now. You don't have that, so you look at what you have today and project from there.
Well, it seems like I'm reading this as they did the projections, and they're saying, based on this density of 4 homes per acre, which is kind of the maximum amount of room people would take up, you need this maximum amount of acreage, which is the 252, to say, like, worst case scenario, this is your projected expansion in the next few years. It could be less, but this is the most amount that you would have to look at.
Yes.
Makes sense to have that number in the plan. I would.
And I still don't
Yeah.
think the fear of too rapid a growth is gonna happen. We've got the lake to the west, we got a big farm to the east, and a river. We got the interstate to the north, and we got some development south, and soon that'll be out of the urban service district. Or a bunch of lift stations.
So I think for the projections, what I'm hearing is that we keep the 4 per square acre and the 252 and not less than that.
Yeah, I
for
would agree
total
with
planning
that.
purposes.
I would agree with that.
And then as we get into housing, we can have the other discussion that you're talking about, Mr. Wolf. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. I'm going to jump ahead to page 8. When we start talking about future neighborhoods, it's very difficult to talk about future neighborhoods without talking about the North Side Neighborhood Development Plan. Historically, these documents get kind of incorporated as a detailed element of the comprehensive plan. There was a land use update to it a few years back, and that was done in conjunction with the development of TID 7 up there. Here, we're just kind of talking in the general sense of that, of what it says. The details are actually in that document, so we don't try to like repeat that. This is are you comfortable with language that's been put in here? The North Side Plan recommends, I'll say, new business park or, light industrial manufacturing in combination with commercial along the interstate, and then multifamily and single family up there, because it's very high, it's got great views, but we weren't trying to get into the details of all that. We're trying to talk in a broad brush. Are you comfortable with that discussion? And then the second piece to that is development that's kind of heading south, as you see where Tyranena Point has developed. So this is just a big conversation about future neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the
Yeah, I thought that looked
language.
good.
And then, yeah, obviously the south, the schools already have property out there. So I'm assuming that's where they're gonna go anyway.
And we've heard from people that have responded to survey and such about the need to make sure neighborhoods are connected. So we want to make sure that that's an important component of whatever happens with future neighborhoods.
Yeah, because there's bike trails heading out that way too,
And the need for safe crossings, obviously,
Yep.
of 89 and A and
Right.
such.
And connecting the sidewalks down there. One point, and this goes back to references, if we're saying, we've adopted the North Side Plan, can we attach that as an exhibit to the final part of this comprehensive plan for ease of reference? Because
Oh, of
otherwise I have
course.
no idea where to find it, and I'm sitting here on this commission, so.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, yes.
That was one
In
point.
a digital world, everything is so much easier now, instead of
Right.
having a 400-page plan.
Exactly, and having to print it out and put it on your desk. Second thing, very small, is we use the term open space in this second paragraph, but we had changed that language to environmental corridors, and just making sure the language is the same throughout once we change things.
Yeah, so the conversation of open space versus environmental corridors are very specific things that are kind of mapped based on a series of conditions. Open space is kind of a general statement of undeveloped areas.
Okay.
So we should look at that a little bit more to make sure that it reads the way you want to based upon what is an environmental corridor versus having planned within the design of development for open space.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I was making that comment because I think it was in a chart, you had changed open spaces to environmental corridor, but maybe you're just changing the reference as opposed to changing the language altogether. We're still
Yes.
using both terms.
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
So here we're going to transition on page 9 to the a discussion of the land use goals, objectives, and policies. And again, this is building off of conversation we had last month. The big comment on the right there is just so it was evident for everybody, what's the difference between a goal and an objective and a policy, just to provide direction. Felt that that's just good for the reader, and to keep us oriented. When we talked last month, we weren't going to change that overarching goal, right? That broad statement of purpose, but we were going to get into discussion of the objectives and policies with more scrutiny. So we talk about a compact pattern of development. What does compact mean to the Plan Commission? When we say compact, is that meaning denser development to you, and how dense, right? Is that 6 units an acre? Is it 8 units an acre? Is it?
Where are we talking?
Well, in this first objectives, it says promote a compact pattern of development. So I feel like compact is a pretty nebulous term, but it's a very commonly used term, especially when talking about traditional neighborhood development principles. But
Well,
I think
Any
you do not
reference?
need the word compact. I think you could just say promote a pattern of development, so on and so forth. And I think the rest of it gets at what you're trying to convey.
well, I was going to ask, do we know what it meant to the last Plan Commission that did this?
No.
I would say probably not that much scrutiny went to it. It was probably just kind of accepted as a statement.
Okay.
I think what you're going to see here in the goals, especially overarching and then with specific future land use categories, is future development should be on sewer, on municipal sewer and within the municipality, right? Compact is a contextual term. Downtown is more compact than, the residential development around downtown is more compact historically than what has just been done on Tyranena Point. But I would say both are very appropriate for the community.
Yeah. So you do not need the term compact. If you strike it, everything else is fine.
Do you think it meant something like along the lines of keeping the footprint of those type of services as small as possible to keep land use for other uses? You know, something like we did with Main Street when we dropped it in the tree line and put most of the stuff in the tree line. I don't know, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we understood what compact meant for you, or maybe it's that the word compact really isn't the most important piece here.
It really,
But it goes on to say that it minimizes degradation of land, water, energy, and air resources and facilitates the creation of interconnected neighborhoods, so on and so forth. So therefore, I think you need the word compact.
Okay.
yeah.
As I remember, and I don't remember if you were here or not, but we had a bunch of meetings downstairs where we brought in the public, and a lot of them were talking about trying to keep the overall boundary of Lake Mills as compact as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what, and that's why I don't think the I mentioned this multiple times, but I don't think the Plan Commission or the City Council read into it what came out of those meetings as to the same concept. They were looking more at just making sure that that growth happened at the edges of the city rather than spreading it all over the county.
Got it. And I would agree, we don't need it.
Okay. So we've amended the interconnected network of complete streets, for crossings. We just wanted to make sure that we were fleshing out the feedback we've received from the public on that. The next one that I really need to talk about is achieve high-quality development of all types. And so my comments are, what does that mean? Right? This needs a lot of detail as to expectations, because what does that mean for commercial and industrial development? What does that mean when we talk about the character of the community, but then you have this issue about regulatory framework. So what is high-quality development of all types?
Yeah, I think we already define that when they go into building or trying to go into planning of their buildings. We already manage that with a different resource. We really need it in here.
Where the problem comes in is like in industrial areas, have such high expectations, there's got to be some place where people can just work. We have such high expectations, it's driven people out, even though theoretically the industrial areas are full, it's driven some out, those that couldn't afford the expectations. And it's a little ridiculous. There needs to be some areas where people can just work. And it's not necessarily a negative thing as far as, beautification.
So later chapter, I'm sorry, Mr.
No, I was just gonna make the comment again, referencing that we already have regulations that say how these things are supposed to be built, and they go through the whole planning process.
And I'm going to reference you to the chapter on economic development, where it spelled out what the expectation was for different development types. Multifamily, there are graphics in there that talk about what's expected, and industrial development, meaning materials and site design, et cetera, which is exactly where the code that's been developed came from. So when you say high-quality development of all types, I feel like it's just too general a statement. But to Mr. Holman's point, if the pendulum is swung in a different direction now as it relates to expectation of specific development, we will have the ability to talk about that in later chapters. But it is something that you do need to think about now. And if this is a land use goal, how does the staff interpret that? So I don't need an answer tonight on that, but it's something that you need to think about, because that's the ripple effect associated with saying high-quality development of all types.
That I would be fine with just getting rid of that particular statement altogether. It's too broad and too subjective, and the statements immediately before it, or the goal for that matter, or other places better define what we're, what we're going for with that.
Okay.
I'd be fine just getting rid of number 9.
Yeah.
I do think you absolutely should define what your expectations are in other chapters and use your codes and ordinances to do that. And if that means the codes and ordinances change to reflect current expectations and values, that's okay. We should talk about that in later chapters. Ms. Lazaris alluded to probably going to be reevaluating the zoning code on the heels of, which is very common, on the heels of a long-range plan update, right, to reflect current opinions. But I'm framing this for you. This is where the current code came from, was the things in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just trying to see if there's another way to word it and leave it in there. Basically saying something like, follow current codes for developments of all types.
Okay.
That way if the codes change, you don't have to change this. But it still gives you a language in there.
We want it to reflect your values, so.
Yeah.
It's just a thought.
We could wordsmith a little bit, and if it ends up getting struck in the future, that's okay? Is that?
Well, another option for that would be to achieve development quality that contributes to the character of Lake Mills. You could say something like that, and of course, that's open-ended as to what is the character and so on and so forth. But as you go through the zoning ordinance, you kind of figure out, kind of what's intended by upholding the character of the community.
Okay.
So
I certainly like that.
Mhm.
It's a little more specific than this broad-ranging and very nebulous high-quality development, that you're tying it to what the character of Lake Mills should be, and you can define that later and through the codes and ordinances, so.
yeah, and with your other goals and objectives to the comprehensive plan, you're setting forth the expectations of the future character of the community anyway.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Is there some kind of level of consensus, the group, to what Ms. Lazaris has added? Is there? I see some head nodding, so okay. Okay.
All right.
The next one on the general land use policies, there are a lot of references in here to the intergovernmental agreement with the town, which, which you were in the heart of when the last plan was done, which is expiring in a handful of months. And so I'm not sure what the status of that is, being renegotiated. I know what the Town of Lake Mills chair said in the focus group about it, which was not very optimistic. So how should we handle things with the intergovernmental agreement? Is it something that is going to be attempted to be renegotiated? Is it something that we just need to say it's expiring and it's something that the city would like to see, would like to renegotiate?
I know it's beneficial for us.
Perhaps you could just say, in accordance with intergovernmental agreements with neighboring jurisdictions, and that would cover any existing agreement.
So the agreement, and I'm sorry to put Mr. Drescher on the spot about the agreement, he just knows the agreement infinitely better than I do when it comes to new development. It was, or updated development within the boundary, it was specific on what might have to annex or connect to utility and what didn't. And I'm not sure how much of it went into providing utilities to the west side of the lake. But there was kind of clear I don't say clear, there was discussion about providing utilities and in the town area.
Not really in the intergovernmental agreement, not with regard to the west side of the lake. It does identify town growth areas, which there's an argument that the city would be required to provide at least sanitary sewer. It does isolate city growth areas where any property that is developed in those areas, new development in those areas, would be required to annex. It is largely driven by the expansion of city services as our state statutes. So, I mean, I guess if you have specific questions about the agreement, we can go there. It is settled, it's sunsetting in November of this year. And I've received the same kind of discourse as Mr. Wolf said with regard to the town's willingness to re-up in that agreement.
So I guess based on what has been past policy of the city, it doesn't provide public infrastructure to areas outside the city unless it's been required to do so?
The agreement didn't have anything to do with us requiring it. We already had the agreement through the court that we would have to provide sewer to the west side under certain conditions, and we kind of told the town that these were going to be the limited areas that we could serve based on capacity, and that pretty much ended it. We told them no water. They already had electric, but electric is kind of framed in that we have our area and the, I think Wisconsin Energies or We Energies has the other. And so depending on where you build your house depends on whether you get our electric or their electric. It's not like we're expanding. So it basically kind of tied everything else. I don't see sanitary sewer expanding out there.
Okay.
And I believe that most of the goals of the municipal boundary agreement from the city's perspective have been achieved. It would be beneficial to us to continue to have municipal boundary agreements with all the surrounding entities, but they haven't taken that attitude. I would recommend that when the new city manager is in, that they look at what City of Madison and some of those Dane County municipalities have done to encourage their towns to agree to municipal boundary agreements. But at this point in time, I didn't see any benefit to pushing it. We talked with them on a couple times that we'd like to do it, and they pretty much resisted.
Okay, so we will certainly in the governmental chapter have an opportunity to discuss intergovernmental agreements, and why the city's going to want to pursue them. In this case, then, I'm going to suggest that we remove the reference to the agreement with the town, and the second part, that you're not going to provide utility services in other towns unless there's some sort of formal intergovernmental agreement in place. And is there comfort with that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. We are going to then be working kind of here forward that utilities are not going to be provided outside of the city limits unless there's some sort of agreement that's been put in place between the city and that municipality. Okay. We have a bullet here that talks about that all new development in the city is required to connect to sewer and water and discourage development within the sanitary sewer service area until those services are readily available. We do have in the code a provision that talks about adequate public facilities, and it has been something that the city has used in the past to say, we can't serve it, so it's not ready to be developed. Are there any situations where connections weren't required and development occurred? I'm not aware of any off the top of my head, but...
Large development?
Yeah, or small development.
We've allowed some single-family homes to sign agreements that say when water becomes available, you have to connect, or you have to connect within a certain period of time, and we've provided sewer and electric as long as they annex. We've never allowed any connections to a property that hasn't annexed except in the town of Lake Mills under the court agreement.
Okay, so then we will clarify that bullet accordingly.
I think if we're clarifying that bullet, honestly, the whole second part of the sentence can just come out. Discourage development within its sanitary sewer service until services are connected. I think that's a given everything else we've said.
Sure.
And then I also think the next bullet point can come out about seeking efficiencies. We kind of already say that before and in the last bullet point, so we can just shorten it up.
Excellent. I'm looking at Brian because he's redlining as we're redlining. So, screening and buffering again. So, well, we've seen kind of both sides, that maybe we need to do a little bit more in certain areas for screening and buffering. I'm sorry, we're on page 10, top of page 10.
Before, if we could go to back to page 9.
Yes.
And then see number 4 under objectives. And I would feel better if it read, create an interconnected network of streets, sidewalks, bicycle trails, and crossings and so forth.
Okay.
It's only because of what may be defined as complete streets, which may not in every instance
It's a fair
be
point.
desirable.
That's a fair point, Ms. Lazaris, that complete streets is kind of a specific thing to,
Yeah.
and the DOT is latched onto it, but it does.
It obligates one to have the street designed a certain way, where if you are not under any such obligation due to, the financing, then perhaps such a design would not be in the best interest of where it is located.
Certainly. That's what I'm bringing up as soon as I get through this section. So it would be my desire, as Mr. Wilkie has brought it up, that we get through this next section on the top of page 10 before we get into details of programs with specific land use types, et cetera. At that point, it'll be a 3-hour meeting, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it would be very ideal to try to kind of work through, get some of your feedback on some of these items. It would be a natural break point, if that's okay.
Certainly.
So here is screening and buffering, adequate screening and buffering. We heard tonight about concerns with certain land uses. And then we need to understand that there can be unhappiness from businesses when those requirements are imposed. this is probably something that should be fleshed out. It's in the code. I'm wondering how much commentary you want on it in here versus referencing what the community would feel is appropriate through code and ordinance.
I like the mention of it here. As far as the specifics, I think that's best left for code, and that has been a source of friction and there's a point to be made on both sides. So I think just saying we need to look for adequate screening and buffering is a good statement here, and then defining what that is best left somewhere else.
Okay.
I would agree.
Aye.
Okay. So the bullet here, we've kind of made some changes because it was later in the code, in the existing plan, it talks about downtown design guideline requirements. But we did update the code, and it does have specific design requirements for historic downtown that are in place. So I just want to make sure that's an acceptable statement change. And then, again, if the code changes, the code changes. I mean, that's a separate entity. We have the city will encourage residential development and planned neighborhoods rather than individual standalone subdivisions. We are trying to encourage planned neighborhoods, but that doesn't mean standalone subdivisions aren't going to happen. And I will point to Tyranena Point, right? It's going to happen. And I don't know if, I think encourage is a great word, but I did want to make sure people say that doesn't mean that we aren't going to allow standalone subdivisions. Again, encouraging a more traditional neighborhood land use pattern. That goes back into allowing smaller lot sizes. And we did hear earlier from tonight that that would be acceptable in the mix of a development, and letting a developer make some decisions on that. Achieving a minimum average net residential density of 4 dwellings per acre for each planned neighborhood. We haven't had a lot of planned neighborhood lately. Again, Arbor Creek was very close. We were trying to encourage it on the north side to have planned neighborhood.
The Ridge.
I'm sorry?
The Ridge.
In the Ridge. I'm sorry, thank you. So I think it's something that we'll have to monitor, especially as you start looking at if you have multiple individual developments that happen, to trying to achieve some of the principles of what we want in planned neighborhood and the densities. Again, here we have another reference to Northside Neighborhood Development Plan. I just want to make sure that we're comfortable with that reference being in there. That plan may change over time, but and then we have ensure that residential development is within a half a mile to a mile some type of public park or open space. The survey indicated that respondents would like to see more parks specifically within neighborhoods. That is different than what had been done previously by city, where we've really looked at just larger parks and people are kind of within a service area of them. Are we comfortable saying that we're trying to encourage parks within neighborhoods, or do you want to leave broad growth that it's kind of you're within a half a mile or so of parks? Both are fine. It's just it provides a little bit more direction when we are working with developers on things.
Do you think that'll hinder developers when we already have a density issue and then they're fighting for land space and all of a sudden they have to also dedicate a park rather than at times fees in lieu of like we've done in the past?
So we asked about that specifically with that focus group, and they said, we're fine dedicating land for a park as long as we are getting the credit for the land dedication and not also being hit with fees in lieu of, right? So I think there's that ability to work with them. We don't say every development should have a park in that sense. It might be 2 or 3 developments have a combined park. It really gets into how the projects are designed, and there may be certain land area that's better for a park that could be shared, or, you know, acreage that could be shared between a couple of adjacent developments.
Steve, look at Tyranena Point down there in the south side. Look at the slopes. You're not going to put a park in those slopes. So you just ask them to pay a fee in lieu of. And when you look at the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and what types of parks they suggest and where they should go, then getting fees in lieu of and being able to apply it to when that comes in and being able to pay some of that money to the developer along with getting a dedication makes it a lot easier to get the appropriate park designs. And we don't want a bunch of ground that we have to mow all the time, that we can't do anything. You know, we don't have a lot of employees and we don't have a lot of ability to finish off the parks. It doesn't do us any good to have that ground. So let's pay attention to where comprehensive outdoor recreation plan is already put together and tie the money together with that.
Does fees in lieu of also work with retention areas?
No, they're required to dedicate detention areas. That's like a street or something else. The water comes, they generate a certain amount of runoff, and they have to control that runoff so it doesn't increase the velocity or the amount of
Has
water.
that changed? Has that requirement changed? It just seems like the retention ponds as of today are so much different than the retention ponds 10 years ago.
There was
Volume-wise.
some change in them based on DNR codes that changed, but the city's code is still the same as it was. So we try and make sure that we incorporate what the DNR's requirement is. They have a lot more quality requirements, which is hard to achieve without a wet bottom. But from the standpoint of the city, we really look at controlling flooding. And DNR is really on the quality, so.
I was, in regards to Badger's retention pond seems so excessive for the volumetric capacity of that land. It's consuming them, or it has.
You have a pretty limited amount of runoff area there, but they're heavily paved or built up. So all those buildings and all that asphalt and all those cars that they have, and all the material, all the quality, that all the stuff that comes off of that adds a lot of pollutants. So the water runs off, it hits that pond, it has to sit long enough for the materials that are in the water to drop to the bottom, and then the water that gets pushed out the other end comes out cleaner. So what you're trying to do is make a combination of enough water to allow the time span to drop the pollutants out. So that's the quality one. And then the quantity one is how much water, new water is running off versus what used to be there. And those things get taken into consideration. So you got those two items working together. So how big is the pipe that runs across the street? Are they going to tear up County Highway V and run all new piping all the way over to Otter Pond? How much water can run out of Otter Pond? How much flooding are you going to do there? How much flooding are you going to do down the way? If you remember, a lot of those areas used to flood pretty bad there where those apartments are, and we've pretty much got that under control now. So we take those into consideration when they're billing. So that's a totally separate item from, we consider that just like streets and water and sewer rather than parks, which is a dedication through an extraction.
So I like it with half mile, even though I do like a park in every new development, but deal with it as we go there. I just want to say whoever designed and built the one in Brookstone, kudos, because they did a good job there and got a good piece of land.
Okay, we can work with that. Our last bullet on this is, again, from the public survey, just reiterating about that residential development is connected, right, to downtown, to facilities, businesses, right, and the parks. So you're going to find that in the next sections, as you start reading through it, because there are policies and programs by specific land use categories. Does get very specific. I think if you're reviewing that, when we meet again, you should be able to provide, I think, very specific, quick, direct feedback on your opinions on that. And we should probably be able to move through it pretty readily. As you can see, it talks about, density sizes and, width of streets and that type of stuff. Is that appropriate? So I think we'll be able to get through that pretty well. With that, we've also provided you initial red line of the utilities, community facilities chapter, so we can get ahead of the curve on that as well.
All right.
I know that makes for a long day today, with all of the regular business items as well as the comp plan. So, is there any initial feedback on the comp plan stuff that you would like us, as we're kind of moving forward with redlining and such? Does this mean with expectation of what you'd like to see? Are the types of comments that you feel
Much
fleshed out
better.
enough?
Yeah, much better.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Carranza, and we'll look forward to continuing the next time. So that brings us to item 11, recommendations for future agendas, and we know we're going to be visiting the comprehensive plan update again.
Yes, and we will have some regular business. We do get the submittal for Farmers and Merchants Bank, which is the old Moe's site. So they will have a conditional use permit that they need, that they will have a rezoning as well of the parcel that they're in the process of annexing. And then you'll be evaluating their site plan.
All right, very well. All right. All right, well, that brings us up to adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, it's been moved. Anyone want a second?
Mr. Coots will second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Coots to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
When opposed, we're adjourned.